All right, so we're very happy to be here with Jeff Goddard of Waterstone Mortgage outside of Atlanta, right, Jeff?
Yeah, we're kind of right in the middle of Atlanta.
Awesome, and we're here at the headquarters for Network and Action in Houston, Texas. So, Jeff, you've been in the mortgage business for a while. How long?
About 10 years now. Prior to that, I was a real estate agent, and I moved over to the dark side of mortgage lending.
What inspired that?
Well, I had coffee with a mortgage lender named Jasmine. We ended up getting married, and it just made sense to move into the same line of work.
That is nice. So you married your new career.
I did, yeah. She took me out to try to get some real estate referrals for her mortgage business, and ended up getting more than she bargained for.
That's great. Well, we're glad you're with us today. We've got a really cool topic. You know, when I first saw you started talking about it, I thought, what a great angle, because there's so many realtors around the country, and they're all sort of fighting for the same crumbs. They're working hard with their relationships to sell and purchase more homes and things like that. And you've got a real way that you can help them do that, right?
Absolutely. That's one of our primary goals with any of our referral partners is how do we help them be more successful?
Yeah. And what's the first thing they say they want from a lender?
You know, it's funny because almost every time we work with any type of referral partner, whether it's a real estate agent or anybody, you know, I'm curious, you know, what's the most important thing for them in terms of their working relationship. And I get several different answers, but one that's always in the top three, and usually number one, is they want a relationship with a mortgage lender that has great communication.
Yeah.
They want to know what's going on in the process. They want the mortgage side of things to not cause problems for their relationship with their client.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's sort of a symbiotic there, that they're handing off their customer to you, and they got to make sure they can trust you, right?
Absolutely. Most people can't buy a home with cash, and that means there's going to be a critical piece of the transaction that's managed by another entity, and you need to have a great working relationship there.
Yeah. So what are some of the tools you use to stay in touch with the realtors?
Well, the first thing that I think is critical to making sure that every time an agent talks to their buyer or seller is that they know what's going on, is to send frequent updates. Even if nothing's happened, at least letting that agent know we're still thinking about this file, we're working on it every day. Maybe we're waiting on the appraisal, but we're waiting on the appraisal and we expect it in 2 days. So we send out semi-weekly, we do Tuesdays and Fridays, written updates to everyone on the transaction. For the buyer side, we get more detailed. Hey, we still need your W-2, for example. On the listing side, we'll talk more about how close we are to a loan approval, where the appraisal is, stuff that impacts the seller. So those frequent client updates, even if nothing is really there to update, and especially if there is something important to update, but they always go out. Another piece of that is it's not just a verbal what's going on in those written updates. We have a loan stage tracker. So it's kind of like the Domino's pizza tracker. When you order one on your phone these days, you can see it went in the oven, it's out for delivery, etc. So it's a visual cue of what's happening in the process and what's been completed. The last piece that we include at many stages during the process is an actual loan calendar based on when the deal started and when it's closing. There are a lot of timelines that are super critical. For example, the CD has to be signed 3 days before closing.
Right.
Everybody's going to know when that is. We need the homeowner's insurance policy this many days before closing. Everybody knows when that is and if it's happened or not. And so those types of calendar, stage tracking, and just frequent updates are some of the most important things I think we could do.
It's cool. You know, I've done a lot of real estate transactions and obviously worked with a lot of mortgage companies, but I never thought about how you're really servicing two customers. You've got the customer that's actually you're processing the loan for, and then also you got to make sure you're taking care of your real estate agent. Mm-hmm. What is the time frame nowadays? You know, what should people expect about the time frame on closing a mortgage from start to finish? Best case scenario, and then let's a couple little hookups.
The best case scenario, like if somebody comes in with a super rush, we are generally able to close in about 10 days, super rush.
Wow.
And we've got to get title and appraisal, and the buyer has to have everything ready to roll into underwriting. So that's not what somebody should expect.
Right.
The general timeline is that usually about 4 weeks is what happens. Usually the first week people are doing the property inspections and things like that. The second week we're doing appraisal and getting into underwriting. The third week we're cleaning up any details. The fourth week we're closing. That's a standard process.
Gotcha. And in this super competitive market, how else do you help the agents get people, with multiple offers and things like that? How do you bring it all together?
I think the lender can really offer the agent a competitive advantage in this multiple offer situation if they have the ability to fully credit approve a borrower before he or she makes an offer on a home. And so that means what we can do is, without a contract in place, we will fully underwrite the borrower. We'll get a letter of approval for that borrower's income, assets, and credit. The only thing we need to close the loan then is title and insurance. Title and appraisal. I'm sorry. So anything property specific still isn't underwritten, and it's very easy. So if you're buying a house with cash, you're still going to have clear title, for example. We can order a rush on the appraisal and get that done very quickly too. So if you have a full credit approved borrower, it's almost as good as cash. You don't have to put in a financing contingency. The financing is done. You'll need to make sure the property appraises and you've got clear title, but a cash buyer is going to want to make sure the value's there and title's clean too. So that full credit approval is a big deal. Another thing we do for our buyer's agents that is really beneficial, and I'm surprised more lenders don't do this, I think they will start, is as soon as an offer goes in, we don't just send them with a pre-approval letter. I get on the phone to that listing agent, and instead of just being somebody that's generated a letter, I'm a third party in the community with a reputation to uphold. And I'm talking to that listing agent and seeing the praises of that buyer. We didn't just generate a letter. I've looked at their credit. We know their assets. They've got solid employment, et cetera. And that can really make a difference when somebody's considering a couple offers.
Yeah. So I can clearly see how you are tied in with the buyer portion of it, but how do you help real estate agents on the listing side as well?
So the most important thing that I see listing agents asking for is understanding where they stand on the contingencies that are in the contract that they just had their seller sign. Mm-hmm. So they've got a deal for their seller. They think everything's going well, but there's still an out for the buyer for financing if that falls apart. There's still an out for the buyer if the appraisal comes in low. And those are two critical pieces that a lot of times can just get overlooked and everyone assume they're going well, but I know it's a point of concern for their seller. So as soon as we're going to have a loan approval, even if it's well prior to the financing contingency expiring, we're reaching out to that listing agent and saying, look, we've got a loan approval, everything's clean, no need to worry. As soon as that appraisal comes in, and prior to it coming in, we're letting them know we expect the appraisal on Thursday, for example. So ultimately, we don't want, anytime a realtor calls us and asks for an update, I feel like we failed. So we try to be ahead of that communication curve.
Yeah, I can see that. And so obviously, like every industry, technology's changed the mortgage business. What type of technology tools do you have there that you could recommend for a realtor to use to help them with their business?
So a couple of things that are pretty handy. One, I mentioned that closing calendar. That technology isn't rocket science, but if you can apply all of the timelines and needs of a mortgage transaction to specific dates that are unique to your contract, and have that populate a closing calendar. We have this on our website. You can plug in the contract date and the closing date, and it'll populate basically a full project workflow for everybody to see. I think that's really helpful.
That's nice, yeah.
And so I see that used with buyer's agents submitting an offer, not just with a pre-approval letter on it. Here's a loan calendar telling you when we're going to have everything done.
Wow.
That fits into the contingency. So I think those types of, basically, to me, the most important technology tools are the communication ones, the ones that let everybody know what's going on. We have a mobile app that lets people upload documents, see the loan calendar, look at different mortgage options if they're out shopping. Some of those things are great. I think that mobile apps don't get used as often as they could. It's a nice to have. I think that a lot of the technology components these days are kind of like having great programs and being able to close a loan on time. If you don't do that, you're not in the game anyway. To me, what really sets lenders apart and the ability to help agents is how well they can communicate during the process.
You know, the other night I had an event, a good buddy of mine, very good friend of about 35 years, a realtor, and I invited him to come to this little family function Friday afternoon late. And he was like, I can't make it. I'm in appraisal. I'm waiting, you know. So what would you say to realtors about the appraisal process, and what advice would you have for them to help them get through that?
You know, I think that appraisals are it's a required part. Some people would say it's a necessary evil, but I think, you know, there are different shades of how lenders can handle appraisals. A lot of lenders these days, since the financial crisis, a lot of about 10 years ago, a lot of changes have been made in the appraisal process and workflow. And to adapt to that, lots of lenders have kind of been forced, whether they want to or not, they've needed to adapt a third party to manage that appraisal process. Those companies are usually called appraisal management companies, or AMCs. It's a third party that will approve the appraisers, that will handle the payment to the appraisers, that might have issues with the appraisal. It's another hand in the jar, if you will, that can in some ways help, but in some ways hurt. I prefer to do the appraisal management like my company Waterstone does, where I can't pick the appraiser by hand that's going to go out and appraise this property. What I can do is pick the 10 appraisers that we have in Atlanta that I've known and trusted for many years. And from that group of 10, we will round robin at random through them.
Gotcha.
The great thing about that is, one, they have a long-lasting business relationship with us. They don't want to screw it up. They're going to work hard to make sure they give us a great appraisal, you know, one that's accurate, not inflated, not low, but, you know, an actual verified appraisal. And the other thing is, without an appraisal management company, those appraisers get 100% of their fee. You know, appraisal management companies can take 30 or 40% of that appraiser's paycheck. You know, when they see an appraisal order come in from my company, I'm thinking it probably gets to the top of the list in terms of what the priority is, because they're not taking a haircut on the deal. So I think managing their own appraisers is a great way for lenders to really add value to the realtors.
And now we've got an appraisal. We're getting closer to closing. There's a little less in terms of surprises nowadays with the document that comes 3 days ahead of time. You pretty much know what you're going to write a check for if you're the buyer. I've heard agents say, man, I hate closings. I try to stay away from them. I'm not going to be anywhere near there. How do you help them get through the closing?
I think the best thing that we do for closings is that we show up to closings. If I can't make it to a closing, one of my team members will. If none of us can make it, which is rare, I'm going to be on the phone, you know, making sure that we're available to answer any questions. But most of the time, we're actually there. Usually the closing attorney is surprised that we show up, but they're happy to have us there. The buyer feels like, you know, we work with them through sometimes a difficult process to go through all of the compliance that has to take place to get a mortgage these days. And, you know, they've been through a lot with the agent as well, and the agent's there, so they feel comfortable having the lender there at closing. I love being there because it's kind of the fruit of all this labor.
Right. Should be a happy time. Somebody's back to take possession of a home in most situations.
Exactly. And the other thing we do is, and to celebrate that, we bring a closing gift to the buyer that is co-branded from both us and the agent. So, nice. You know, it's a personalized gift, and it's from both us and the agent. So we really try to honor that realtor relationship and make sure that anytime that buyer thinks of us after closing, they also think of the real estate agent.
Very nice. So, Jeff, how do they reach you at Waterstone? How big an area can you service? You can all of Georgia, obviously, or?
My office is in Atlanta. 90% of our business is in Georgia, but Waterstone's nationwide. So I can do loans almost every state in the country. So it's a pretty big area we can cover.
Fantastic. And they reach you at what phone number and what email?
Our main line is 404-600-1500. And my email address is jgoddard at waterstonemortgage.com.
Great. Well, we certainly appreciate your time and, more importantly, your expertise helping us. I'm going to make sure we get this to a lot of realtors, and I'm sure they're going to appreciate the advice. It's great talking with you. Thanks for joining us today in Network in Action.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott. It's good to be here.
Great. Thank you.